A first date is the only social interaction where two adults agree to spend 90 minutes performing a fictional version of themselves while silently auditing whether the other person deserves access to the real one. You are essentially conducting a job interview where both parties are simultaneously the hiring manager and the candidate, and nobody admits that's what's happening. I'm about to explain what a first date actually is, what makes it work, and why most people walk away from good ones feeling like they failed. No romantic mythology, just an honest breakdown of what you're actually doing when you sit across from someone for the first time. Here's what a first date actually is at its core. It is an information exchange disguised as a social experience. Two people are trying to determine compatibility while simultaneously trying to appear compatible. That's the whole thing. Everything else, the venue, the outfit, the conversation topics, is just the packaging around that core transaction. Notice what's not in that definition. Chemistry, magic, instant connection, the moment you just know. These are myths that destroy first dates because people think something's wrong when the interaction feels like two people cautiously feeling each other out instead of a movie scene. A first date is supposed to feel slightly uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a red flag. It's two nervous systems meeting for the first time and trying to establish whether the other one is safe. Most people spend more time choosing what to wear to a first date than understanding what they're actually trying to accomplish on one. They focus on making an impression and ignore that the goal is to gather information. This is like going into a negotiation and only thinking about how you look walking into the room. Kaim, here's the first truth about first dates nobody tells you. You are not trying to be liked. You are trying to evaluate fit. These are completely different objectives, and they produce completely different behavior. When your only goal is to be liked, you perform. You agree with things you don't agree with. You soften edges that are actually core to who you are. You leave the date having revealed nothing real about yourself and having learned nothing real about the other person. And then you wonder why a second date with someone you auditioned so hard for feels hollow. The people who are naturally good at first dates are not more charming. They are more curious. They treat the date as something they are gathering data from rather than something they are performing for. That shift in orientation changes everything. Your body language relaxes. Your questions become genuine, and the conversation stops feeling like a test you could fail. Second truth that determines whether a first date actually works. Attraction is not what you think it is at this stage, and confusing it with something else is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. Most people evaluate a first date by whether they felt a strong physical pull or an immediate emotional high. If those weren't present, they write the person off. If those were present, they proceed regardless of everything else. Both of those are wrong. Early attraction is almost entirely novelty and projection. You are not attracted to the person sitting across from you. You are attracted to the story you are constructing about them in real time, based on limited information, the parts you don't know yet. Your brain fills in favorably when you're physically drawn to someone, and fills in negatively when you're not. This means the electric first date you keep chasing is often just your brain projecting a fantasy onto someone you haven't actually met yet. And the quiet, easy first date you keep dismissing is often the one where two people were actually seeing each other clearly. Comfort and ease on a first date are not signs of no chemistry. They are signs of compatibility. That difference matters enormously if you keep ending up in relationships that feel exciting at the start and exhausting 6 months later. Third truth about first dates. The conversation topics you choose are far less important than the dynamic they create. Most first date advice is about what to talk about. Avoid ex-partners. Don't discuss politics. Stay positive. This is surface-level guidance that misses the actual point. The topics don't matter. The dynamic does. A dynamic where one person performs and the other evaluates will feel like an audition, regardless of subject matter. A dynamic where both people are genuinely curious creates connection, regardless of topic. This is why two people can have an incredible first date talking about nothing in particular, and two other people can cover every supposedly correct topic and leave feeling nothing. What you're actually building in the first 20 minutes is a conversational rhythm. Whoever sets that rhythm controls the entire experience. If you ask two genuine questions in a row, you have set the expectation that this is a conversation, not a presentation. If you spend the first 15 minutes talking about yourself, you have signaled something about how you move in relationships, and the other person's nervous system has already registered it. Fourth truth about successful first dates. Anxiety is not the problem. Unmanaged anxiety is. Almost everyone is nervous on a first date. The people who appear effortlessly relaxed are not less nervous. They have learned to use the anxiety as information rather than fighting it as interference. Unmanaged anxiety makes you talk too much. It makes you fill silences that didn't need filling. It makes you over-explain things that landed fine the first time. It makes you ask follow-up questions immediately after your own sentences, preemptively defending positions nobody challenged. The other person doesn't experience this as nervousness. They experience it as someone who is not fully present, because you're inside your own head, monitoring yourself instead of paying attention to them. The fastest way to manage first date anxiety is to transfer your attention from yourself to the other person. You cannot be simultaneously self-conscious and genuinely curious. Pick one. Curiosity wins every time. The physical and emotional close of the date communicates more than everything that happened during it. Most people treat the ending as the awkward part they have to survive after the actual date is over. That's backwards. The close is where the date's meaning gets established. A date that ends with both people clearly wanting more, but neither person saying it directly, creates ambiguity that breeds anxiety. A date that ends with one person making clear they had a good time and would like to see the other person again removes an enormous amount of guesswork that otherwise fills the next 48 hours with second guessing. The close doesn't have to be dramatic or perfectly worded. It has to be honest. Two adults who had a genuinely good time can say so. That is not desperation. That is communication. The culture that says expressing interest is a sign of weakness is the same culture that produces grown adults analyzing text message timestamps to gauge mutual interest. Here's the uncomfortable truth about first dates and why most of them feel like they went badly. The date probably went fine. Your nervous system just doesn't know how to interpret a neutral outcome. Most first dates don't fail because something went wrong. They fail because one or both people were evaluating the date against an internal standard that had nothing to do with the actual person across from them, a fantasy built from previous experiences, media consumption, or a checklist assembled from things that sounded good but have never been tested against reality. You cannot evaluate a real person against an imaginary one and get a fair result. The imaginary person always wins because they have no flaws, no nervous tics, no half-formed sentences, no moment where they reached for something to say and came up short. Real people do all of those things. A first date where both people were real with each other is a successful first date, even if it doesn't lead to a second one. Here's what a genuinely good first date looks like in practice. Two people who arrived with curiosity rather than a performance agenda. Conversation that moved in unexpected directions because both people followed genuine interest rather than prescribed safe topics. At least one moment where someone said something honest that they didn't know how to package perfectly. A close that was clear rather than ambiguous. Neither person spent the evening managing the other person's perception of them. Both people left knowing something real about the other person that they didn't know before they arrived. The date doesn't have to be exciting. It doesn't have to produce a love story you want to tell at your wedding. It has to be real. And it has to tell you something true about whether this person's life and yours could actually function together. Here's what you need to know if you're heading into a first date. Don't go to be chosen. Go to choose. Don't perform a version of yourself you think they want to meet. Show up as the version they would actually be in a relationship with. Don't evaluate the date by how it felt in the moment. Evaluate it by how much you actually learned about the other person. Don't treat anxiety as a sign that something's wrong. Treat it as confirmation that something matters. And if you've been on first dates that felt right in the moment, but led nowhere, or first dates that felt awkward but somehow turned into something real, you already know that your feelings during the date are not reliable data. What you did, how present you were, how honest you were, that's the data. First dates are simple in concept and uncomfortable in execution. But understanding what you're actually doing when you walk into one changes every decision you make, from the moment you sit down to the moment you say goodbye. Subscribe for more honest breakdowns of the things everyone experiences and almost nobody explains clearly. Tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you wish you'd understood about first dates before you started going on them?